Hi, 7th and 8th grade. Welcome back. Happy Friday. Another end to a remote learning week. It is May 8th, and we are still in our human development study talking about nutrition. All right? And so before I jump into the information on this slide, don't forget, we're still running the game, so keep sending me your lists of healthy versus unhealthy for your chance at the $10 gift card. All right? So don't forget about that, and we are going to actually dive in today to some of the nutrition information, mostly focusing on nutrition facts labels and the major components of nutrients in your body. All right? And so this is found in your text on page, let's see, 299 is where this information starts, and we will probably be in this section for another 2 or 3 videos at least, because there's a lot of information to cover in this section. So let's start. The cells of our bodies, you can think of them like little factories. We studied those earlier in the school year, and we talked about all the different organelles. You guys worked in group projects to create those cell diagrams that you guys did. I still have some of those tucked away in the classroom. And so we talked about all those different organelles and their jobs and their functions. And so we can think of cells as like little factories that have a bunch of different tasks that need to accomplish. Things like making biochemicals, like the different molecules and substances that our body needs, or releasing energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, known as ATP. Okay, we need that energy to live, to grow, and to repair tissues. Every time you get a cut, you need energy, and you need your cells to undergo mitosis, which we also studied this year, to repair that cut and to make new healthy tissue form. And as you go through puberty and your bones are growing and your skin is stretching and just everything on you is growing and multiplying, this requires those factories to be doing a lot of work. But just like a factory that makes, I don't know, different parts or toys for a children's game maybe, they need the raw materials to make the board game or the teddy bear, right? Our cells need those raw materials too, okay? And what are those raw materials? Well, those are the nutrients, okay? Nutrients that we eat. And so a nutrient can be described or defined as a substance that a living thing must take in order to grow, maintain, or repair cells. And so nutrients don't just appear in the body, they come from the food that we eat. We have to take many nutrients in. It's important to note that while certain nutrients can be made or synthesized in the body if you don't eat them, most nutrients we consider to be essential, meaning that we need to take them in from outside sources of food, or our body will not get them. Our body doesn't have an ability to make those things. And so if a certain nutrient is missing, the cell will either stop working or stop performing its task, so that part of the factory will shut down. Or it will try, if possible, if it's one of the few nutrients that our body can actually make on its own in times of lacking, it can try to derive that nutrients from somewhere else in the body. But the problem is that's often not good. It comes at a consequence, because if we have to pull some materials from somewhere else in the body because we didn't consume enough of it, then that part of the body that we're taking those materials from is going to suffer, because it too needs those materials, and now we're taking part of its supply. And so that's why it's important to eat a well-rounded diet full of all the nutrients that we need, especially the essential ones that we cannot make. And that is what's going to allow those cells and those factories, if you will, to function properly. And of course, different foods provide different nutrients. So, you know, fruits and vegetables provide probably a little bit more nutrients than, say, a chocolate chip cookie does. But nonetheless, there's still nutrients in that chocolate chip cookie. But we need to eat a variety of foods to get a variety of those nutrients in a well-balanced proportion for our health, and to be able to do the things that our body needs to do the way God designed it. All right, so you may be familiar or have seen this image before. This is called the USDA MyPlate. USDA stands for United States Department of Agriculture, and they handle much of the government given out nutrition information. And there are controversy over that. I won't get into that too much, although if you'd like to know more, I'm happy to have a riveting discussion with you on how I feel about the government guidelines. But this is the standard MyPlate. This actually this replaced back in I believe it was about 2010. This replaced the food pyramid. So you've probably heard of a food pyramid before or seen it. And that was actually the old version of the USDA guidelines. And so we used to have food pyramids everywhere, but they made the switch, roughly about 10 years ago to the plate because it's more practical for people like ourselves to visualize what a plate should look like of food versus a pyramid of food. So this is what they've switched to. And it contains the 5 USDA food groups. So the USDA defines the 5 food groups as fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. And you can see here on the My Plate that all of those 5 groups are represented. Okay, so vegetables, that's self-explanatory. You know what fruits are. Grains, that counts as things like rice and quinoa and pastas, basically carby things. Protein, that's going to be like your meats, your eggs, your beans, and dairy would be a glass of milk. Maybe that's a cup of yogurt or kefir, which is a drinkable type of yogurt, or a serving of cheese, something along that line. So those are the 5 food groups according to the United States Department of Agriculture. Okay, it's important to know that there are 2 major classes of nutrients. We have the macronutrients and the micronutrients. So macro is for the fact that these nutrients are needed in large supply in the body. So that's your carbohydrates, your lipids, which are your fats, and protein in your body. And then we have micronutrients, and those are the things that are still necessary, but they're needed in smaller or microscopic amounts compared to the macronutrients. And so that's going to be things like your vitamins and minerals. There are 6 classes of nutrients, and it's important right now to make the distinction. Do not get confused. While the USDA has the 5 food groups that we just went over, there are 6 classes of nutrients, so don't mix them up. Okay, these are distinctly different lists. Okay, so make that distinction in your head. 5 food groups versus the 6 classes of nutrients. The 6 classes of nutrients are basically what we just said, the macro and the micronutrients, except for the addition of water. So carbs, protein, lipids, which is fat, water, vitamins, and minerals. That's the 6 classes of nutrients in the human body. Most foods that you eat and consume on a day-to-day basis contain a mixture of those 6 classes of nutrients. Very few exceptions. I mean, if you go and pour just get a glass of water from your tap, you may think I'm just consuming water, but you may not realize that there's actually a lot of trace minerals that are probably in your water. Electrolytes and stuff that are naturally occurring in well water or town water or have been added in. Same goes for bottles of water. If you look, a lot of times it'll say electrolytes added for taste or minerals added for taste. So even when you think you're just drinking water, you're actually getting more than one class of nutrients. Same with you eating a piece of chicken. You're getting protein there, but you're also getting a little bit fat, especially if you eat the skin, and there's vitamins in there, and there's minerals in there, and there's even a trace amount of carbohydrates, although small. All of those are in there. So basically, all the foods we eat, it's in a mixture. Some are in greater proportions than others, but still, you're getting a wide variety of the 6 classes of nutrients. And all of these nutrients, especially the carbs, lipids, and proteins, provide the building blocks for cell growth and repair and the energy that your cells need to function. So it's the macronutrients that really provide the cells with what they need, like the raw materials, to be the factory that they're intended to produce, whatever their job is in the body. So the amount of energy in a food, okay, we're talking calories here, is measured in joules if you're talking about the metric system. So most other countries in the world in joules. Or calories, also called kcals for kilocalories, in the United States customary system. So, of course, we live in the United States. All of our food packaging that originates in the United States is going to be in the U.S. customary system and say calories. Okay, and don't get confused. Kcals and calories are the same thing. I will use the words interchangeably throughout this entire unit. Sometimes I just say kcals because that was the way I was trained in college, and so if that comes out, I just mean calories. So the calories you see on a food label. All right, and so in the U.S. customary system, 1 gram of protein, so if you measured out exactly 1 gram of protein, it would equal 4 kcals, or 4 calories. okay? If you measured out 1 gram of carbohydrates, it too would actually measure out to be 4 kcals. And if you measured out 1 gram of a fat or a lipid, it actually would be 9 kcals. So we can say from this that fats are more nutrient dense and calorically dense, meaning that you get more calories from the same size of lipids or fats as you do carbs. So while protein and carbs provide 4 calories, fat provides 9. You may be wondering, and this is just a side note, but how did they figure that out? Like, how did they figure out that 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories of fat? They actually burn the food, and they use a special machine to burn the food to calculate how much energy is released, or how many joules of energy gets released, and that's how they determined that set amount. All right, and there is some fluctuation with that, but generally speaking, right around 4 calories from 1 gram of protein and carbs, and 9 for fat. And so using this information, you might be like, why do I need to know this, or why does this matter? Using this information, we can calculate the total number of calories in food without actually looking at the total calories on the nutrition label. Of course, you guys know, if you've ever looked at a nutrition label, maybe you haven't, but hopefully you have at this point, at least seen one. Usually it says at the top, total calories, right? Great. They've done the math for us, but it's important for us to understand how they got there. And so by knowing this information, the 4, 4, 9, we can actually calculate exactly how many calories are in our food without being told the total amount. And this helps us to better understand nutrition facts labels and understand better which foods are going to be a healthier choice for us. So, do you know how to read a nutrition facts label? Well, if you don't, we're about to learn over the next video or two exactly what a lot of this stuff means. So when I say nutrition facts label, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, it says nutrition facts right at the top here. All right, and so the first thing we're going to look at is the amount of servings per container. So this is the amount of servings per container. And what I mean by container, maybe it's the whole package, the whole box, the can, the jar. Okay, so 1 full container of whatever the food is. This is different though from serving size, all right? So serving size is not the same as the whole container. It's how much is 1 serving of the food, okay? So in this case, whatever food this nutrition facts label is for, there's 4 servings, so 4 people could eat off of this box of whatever this is. And each serving of that food would be 1.5 cups. So that's the serving. So that's 1 portion of the particular food. Okay? And it's important to note that when you're looking at a nutrition facts label, almost always, we're talking all these numbers here, all these details, and the calories and stuff and such, those all pertain to 1 serving size, or 1 serving of the food, not per container. All right, so if you wanted to figure out if there's 240 calories in 1.5 cups, then in the entire box or the entire container, in the 4 servings per container, there'd actually be 960 calories if you ate the whole box. So let's just say this is a box of Cheez-Its for fun, and you decide to open the box of Cheez-Its and sit on the couch, and you're watching your favorite movie, and you're doing what most of us do, and you're mindlessly eating the Cheez-Its because they're addictive and you're not paying attention, and the next thing you know, you just ate the whole box of Cheez-Its. Well, you turn it around and you look to say, oh gosh, how many calories did I just eat? And you see 240. Well, 240 was for 1 serving. You ate the whole box, and this box says that there's 4 servings in that whole box, so you have to times all of these numbers by 4 to get the full container. So that's that distinction. Oftentimes people don't realize there is a difference between a serving size or not. And sometimes I'll throw this in there, a lot of times the serving sizes on a package are deceiving or even a little bit silly in my mind. Like, let me think of a good example. Goldfish. I believe 1 serving size of goldfish is 55 goldfish. I don't know about you, but the last time I dumped out a bowl of goldfish, I did not sit there and count 55 goldfish out exactly. That's just silly. No one does that. I mean, unless you're really counting calories and you're on a specific diet, but typically speaking, you're not going to count exactly 55. Or I believe the wheat thins or the frosted mini wheats from our other video challenge, the serving size is 25 biscuits or 25 of the little mini wheats, right? Again, I don't know about you, but when I was pouring out cereal as a kid, I was not counting 25 biscuits out to know what a serving was, right? And so it can be deceiving, and we often are consuming way more calories than we realize because the calories on the box are for a set serving size that's not necessarily realistic, or maybe not the serving size that we took when we poured out or dished out that food. So pay attention to that, and pay attention to what a serving is and how many servings should be in one container or one box. All right. The next thing we're going to look at is just the calories. Like I said, this calorie is just for one serving, and this is going to be the number that we're going to practice calculating based off of that 4:4:9 ratio that we just talked about. Okay? And then you can see here on the nutrition facts label, I've highlighted the macronutrients, the nutrients that your cells need in large quantities to do their job. You have total fat is always the first, followed by total carbohydrates and protein. And in a future video, we will talk about why there's some other stuff underneath some of these categories, because there are some other factors that go into the total. But for right now and for today's video lesson, we're just going to focus on the three main categories. All right, and so we're going to use these three numbers to calculate if the total calories as if the total calories were not given. All right, so let's try one right here. So the first step for this is going to be to calculate the total calories from fat, calculate calories from total carbohydrates, followed by calories from protein. Okay, so these are the numbers we're going to be using. So for fat, 4.5 grams, for total carbohydrates, 6 grams, and for protein, 4 grams. All right, so if we do that, steps 1, 2, and 3, we're going to use the numbers from the earlier slide. 4 kcals for protein, 4 kcals for carbohydrates, and 9 kcals for lipids. And we're going to take these numbers and we're going to do the math out just like this. So 4.5 grams of total fat. We know that 9 kcals for every 1 gram of fat. Okay, so 9 times 4.5 gives us 40.5. 6 grams of total carbs from here. By 4, we know 4 kcals for every gram of carb gives us 24 kcals that came from carbohydrates. And 4 kcals for 1 gram of protein, and we had the 4 grams of protein, so 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, and so last step, we're going to just add our totals all together. 40.5 plus 24 plus 16 gives us 80.5 kcals per serving. So let's see, did we do it right? We did it. Now, we just got 80.5. This nutrition facts label is saying that there's 80 calories in the food. How can that be? Well, there are certain laws with different companies, and it's a U.S. government regulation thing that allow companies to round up or down. So while technically there are 80.5 calories in one serving of this, they're able just to put 80. And it's mostly for simplicity's sake, and it's kind of annoying to me because it doesn't follow the typical math rule that I'm sure Mr. Turner has drilled into your head, but 80.5, typically we would round that up to 81. But again, it's mostly for simplicity's sake. This company is using their own discretion. 80 calories looks a little bit better than 81 calories on a nutrition facts label, if we're being honest, especially for someone who's trying to watch their weight. They'd rather see 80 calories than 81. What's that extra 0.5, you know? So that's why the discrepancy is there. But as you can see, we did the math backwards and got to that answer. And so that's how nutrition facts labels are calculated. Now, what if I said, if we did this but for 2 or 3 or 4 servings of this food, what would you need to do? Okay, if I said that we needed to calculate the amount of calories in 2 servings of this, and we only had the information on the other page, you would do the math all out like you did, but you would obviously times it by 2 or 3 or 4. Or maybe I'll ask you to calculate in the whole container. All right, so in this case, you're going to look up the top. How many servings are in one whole container? Not one serving, but one container of this food. It's 6. All right, so you would take that number that we calculate and you would multiply it by 6. All right, and so for your homework, I have 3 practice problems just like the one we just did. And so you're going to practice counting total calories from nutrition facts labels, and you're going to send your answers to me in an email. So you can either write them out or you can type them up in an email or Google Docs and send them over to me, whatever's easier for you. All All right, so problem number 1. Okay, you're probably going to want to pause these, do them out, and go to the next one, and next one, and next one, or write them all out and then go back. All right, so problem number 1 says how many calories are in 1 serving of this food? So you're using this nutrition facts label for how many calories are in 1 serving of this food. Problem number 2 for homework. How many calories are in a 3/4 cup serving? All right, so pay attention to what 1 serving of this is and calculate accordingly using this nutrition facts label. And just note the facts labels are different for each problem. So don't use the same nutrition facts label. Each problem has its own. So this one goes to this one. And number 3, how many calories are in 1 container of this food using this nutrition facts label? Okay, so those are your 3 homework problems. Email those to me, and I will see you again for our next video lesson next week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.